Kennedy Wells, 39 years old, Chief Strategy Officer at a major media corporation headquartered in New York. My life used to be something people envied. A luxurious penthouse in Manhattan, a schedule filled with international business trips, and a husband so perfect he made my colleagues green with envy. I met Matthew at a public health symposium at Stanford during our senior year. He was the standout medical student of his class, praised by professors as someone destined to bring honor to whichever hospital was lucky enough to have him. Back then, I had no idea how quickly the meaning of the word lucky could shift. After graduation, I started at a media firm in Chicago before being transferred to New York, while Matthew pursued neurosurgery. We didn't have children, that was a mutual decision, or so I thought. He said he needed to focus fully on his specialty, and I was consumed by global campaigns. Between boardroom presentations and his 8-hour surgeries, we tried to maintain the illusion of happiness. For 13 years, I held on to the belief that if I was strong enough, strategic enough, I could keep everything under control. My career, my image, and my marriage. I used to host flawless dinner parties, down to the last martini glass. I knew exactly where every knife in the Italian silver set belonged, and which angle made Matthew look most dignified in photos. I was the kind of woman who never stepped out without red lipstick. Everything was in place. Until that one fateful afternoon. It was raining that day and traffic was backed up along Fifth Avenue due to an accident. I got home earlier than planned, hoping to make dinner to celebrate Matthew's promotion to head of neurosurgery at Westlake Hospital. While searching for the iPad to book our favorite restaurant, I saw a message flash across the lock screen. Counting the hours until I see you, I left the red dress you like in the car. Sent from an unsaved number, and Matthew hadn't updated his passcode. I'm not the type to lose composure over a single message. But what appeared after one simple swipe hit me like a slab of ice pressed against my chest. Messages, photos, sweet nothings, accompanied by selfies taken at a quaint hotel in suburban New Jersey. He called her Melta, name that felt lighter than air, yet cut sharper than any scalpel he used in surgery. Melanie, 28 years old, a medical resident at the same hospital as Matthew. While I was delivering a keynote at a media conference in London, they were sneaking around in a weekly rental. While I was defending a quarterly budget in front of the board, they were trading nude photos and whispering plans to move in together after Matthew's divorce. It wasn't the betrayal that broke me. It was how they laughed at my supposed cluelessness in those texts. She really doesn't suspect anything? No, she's too busy to notice her husband fading away. That's when I realized. Everything I'd built for over a decade was just polished paint covering a wall that had rotted from within. And I, Kennedy Wells, the woman who once convinced 2 Fortune 500 CEOs to merge with just a handshake, had let my marriage become the punchline of 2 people playing pretend. No tears, no yelling, just an instrumental playlist, a glass of white wine, and the start of a plan. Not a divorce plan. A plan to end everything, on my terms. I didn't throw the phone, I didn't tear the pictures. Every message from Melanie felt like a blade of ice, but I refused to bleed, at least not yet. That night I sat in front of my computer, pale blue light casting shadows on my cheek like a spotlight before curtain rise, and I did what I do best, analyze, strategize, and take control of the field. 3 days later, I called Julian Myers, a private investigator who once worked with our legal department during a campaign plagiarism case. He wasn't the type to ask pointless questions or write lengthy reports. I simply said, "Matthew Wells, Melanie Carter, I need everything." Julian didn't ask why. In his world, reasons are a luxury. During the first week, I acted like nothing had changed. I still cooked breakfast, still texted Matthew how was the surgery today, and still locked the bedroom door at night. Only difference was, I started sleeping in the study. By week 2, Julian sent over the first video. Matthew leaving the hospital parking lot, picking up Melanie at the pharmacy corner. She climbed into the passenger seat like it was routine. They had no idea the small camera mounted to the traffic light had recorded them kissing before the Range Rover pulled away. I saved that clip in a folder titled Winter Rain, a cold name for a feeling that had long since frozen inside me. The following month brought a storm of information. Julian's team traced a 2-bedroom apartment in the Upper East Side, registered to a shell company. That company Was incorporated by Matthew last year, around the time he started traveling more. Hotel bills. Badge scan logs from the hospital. Oddly overlapping shift schedules. Everything started fitting together like a puzzle only I could solve. But what I didn't expect was what I found in the thick file Julian dropped off. Thicker than any media contract I'd handled in 17 years. Inside was a series of insurance claims for neurosurgical procedures Matthew had performed himself. Patient names, surgery dates, preliminary diagnoses, billing details, all accounted for, but several cases showed signs of being medically unnecessary. Julian said bluntly. At least 3 patients claimed they were pressured into surgery or didn't fully understand the medical indication. One even filed a complaint, but it got buried by the hospital. I could barely breathe reading that. Matthew hadn't just betrayed me. He might have been gambling with patients' health for surgical metrics and bonuses from pharma reps. And Melanie? Julian showed me internal hospital system logs. Melanie had used Matthew's login to access patient records, something residents are not permitted to do unless they're directly involved in care. She'd even printed confidential documents from the hospital's server, some directly tied to those questionable surgeries. I folded the file shut, my hand resting next to a white porcelain mug that read, "Wells Stronger Together, a 10th anniversary gift." A cruel irony. But I didn't cry. I just stared at the faded slogan, then typed the first line into a new document on my laptop. Dismantle everything they secretly built, without leaving a single scratch on my own reputation. The plan began taking shape clearly. I wasn't going to stage a jealous outburst. I wasn't going to destroy their careers with a single explosive move. I would peel back each layer of deception, every unethical act, every shady dollar, and assemble it all into one airtight file. No accusations needed. The truth was destructive enough. What I needed was time, and time they were handing to me freely, with every stolen meeting, every secret touch, every lie Matthew told, never realizing I was documenting everything. I chose a Friday evening, the day Matthew always claimed to be on night shift. I knew he had no scheduled surgeries, and I knew Melanie would be free. They had planned to have dinner at the secret apartment, but this time I changed the venue. "Melanie, I know everything, and I'd like to invite you to dinner, at my home, with Matthew." I sent the message short and direct. 10 minutes later, the typing dots appeared on the screen, then vanished. No reply. But I knew she would come. Women like Melanie don't miss the chance to confront, especially when they think they're winning. I began preparing early that morning. Not the food, but the atmosphere. Everything had to be staged perfectly, like a final act in a play. Warm golden lighting, a soft jasmine scent in the air. Every photo frame straightened, especially the wedding portrait centered on the bookshelf, the one Matthew once asked me to put away for neatness. I wore a classic sapphire silk dress, cinched at the waist, modest and elegant. A gift he gave me 5 years ago with the words, "You look like a symphony in that." But tonight, I wasn't the musician, I was the composer. And this would be the final movement. In the small clutch bag beside my chair was a USB drive containing all the evidence: videos, photos, financial records, hospital access logs, and everything Julian had quietly collected over the past 2 months. I had also prepared a slide presentation linked to the hidden projection system behind the large mirror in the dining room, a feature Matthew never paid attention to when we renovated the house. The doorbell rang at 6:57 p.m. I glanced at my phone screen, showing the front door camera feed. Melanie Carter, 28 years old, blonde hair loose, a deep burgundy dress hugging her frame. Heavier makeup than usual, but she couldn't hide the nervous flicker in her eyes. I opened the door with a smile. "Melanie, right on time." She froze for half a second upon seeing me, or perhaps upon seeing the wedding photo behind me. Then she stepped in like someone accepting an invitation to a negotiation. She was wrong. This was the final performance. Matthew arrived 15 minutes later, a leather bag slung loosely over his shoulder. His eyes went first to Melanie, then to me. In that moment I saw the spark of fear begin, and he realized he was no longer in control. "You planned a dinner?" he asked, trying to steady his voice. I served the wine and motioned for them to sit at a table arranged with clinical precision. Medium rare steaks, fresh salad and warm bread, not a single detail out of line, everything was suffocatingly perfect. To Matthew, I said, raising my glass. For his dedication to medicine, and for his new choices. Melanie forced a sip. Matthew gripped his wine glass as if he might crush it with his bare hands. I watched every reaction, the diverted gazes, the trembling hands, the shallow breaths. Every beat was expected, calculated. Dinner passed in awkward civility. They tried to stay polite, avoid touching, neither mentioning the real reason we were all sitting there. Until I set my knife down, dabbed my mouth with a white napkin and said calmly, "I have a special dessert, but first, I'd like to share some interesting visuals." Beneath the napkin, the remote waited. A single press, and the mirror flickered into a screen. The first image appeared. Matthew and Melanie kissing in his car, 12 months ago, in front of the Magnolia Inn. Melanie dropped her glass. Matthew sprang up. "What the hell?" "Sit down, Matthew," I interrupted, my tone still as calm as a quarterly briefing. I clicked again. The secret apartment lease. A video of Melanie using Matthew's badge to print medical records. A slide analyzing the rate of medically unnecessary surgeries Matthew had performed. Each piece of evidence was a surgical strike. No blood but no healing either. Finally, I opened the last file, resolutions. Inside were copies of the divorce filing, the property division terms based on sustained infidelity, and the packets already sent to the State Medical Investigation Board. I wasn't threatening them, I was stating facts. Melanie went pale, Matthew lowered his head. And I, after months of silence, poured myself a fresh glass of wine and sipped it like I was uncorking a new chapter of my life. The smart mirror cast a cold light across their stunned faces. They sat frozen, eyes locked on the screen like hypnotized subjects. But I knew. They were calculating, plotting exits, rehearsing denials. What they didn't know was that I had blocked every possible door weeks ago. I rose slowly, wineglass in hand, eyes locked on Matthew. "You know I hate mess," I said, my voice as light as an autumn breeze. "So I organized everything, my way." The next slide appeared. A chart of Matthew's surgeries over the past 2 years, with the anomalies highlighted. Surgeries scheduled too close together, identical diagnoses with completely different clinical outcomes. Melanie let out a shaky breath, her eyes darting. "I sent this chart to an independent medical consultant," I said, walking slowly toward the table. She confirmed at least 7 surgeries were unnecessary, and in 4 of them the patients suffered long-term complications. I pressed the button, medical records appeared on screen. These were real people, with names, faces, families. Not numbers. Not props for Matthew to inflate his professional stats. "And here's my favorite part," I said, clicking to the next slide. Photos of Matthew accepting envelopes from a pharmaceutical rep in the lobby of the Fairmont Hotel on 3 separate nights. "They called it clinical research support," I said with a cold smile. "I call it bribery." Matthew said nothing, his fingers clenched around the chair, knuckles bone white. Melanie, in contrast, began to panic for real. She lunged toward the table. "You're making this up, you don't have any legal proof." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I do, and more than that." From my purse, I pulled out 2 envelopes, one thick, one thinner, but no less important. I placed the thicker one in front of Matthew. "Divorce papers," I said. "Signed, notarized, and filed this morning. I'm keeping this apartment, the Aspen vacation house, both vehicles, and 60% of the assets I proved were earned through my own labor. And this one?" I placed the smaller envelope in front of Melanie. "Your temporary resignation from Westlake Hospital, along with the HR acceptance letter. If you don't sign tonight, I'll forward the full report of your unauthorized patient record access to the National Ethics Board." She shot up from her seat. "You can't force me, I didn't do anything wrong." I looked her in the eye. "You used Matthew's login to access records for 3 patients outside your assigned care. I have system logs, I have screenshots, I even have video from the internal security camera you didn't know was tracking internal access." Melanie trembled. She turned to Matthew. "You told me I was safe." Matthew no longer looked like the top-peer neurosurgeon. His head dropped, no defense left to give. I stood without another word and tapped a button on my phone. Within seconds, both their phones began buzzing non-stop, messages, alerts, emails from anonymous sources. Files had been sent to the state medical board, insurance companies, and a group of independent medical journalists. I checked my watch. In about 12 minutes, I said, Dr. Kristen Layton will receive the full dossier on Matthew from me. And she's not someone who delays escalation. Matthew stepped forward, his eyes wild. Kennedy, can we talk? Just us. 13 years can't end like this. I tilted my head. It's not ending like this, Matthew. I walked over to the wine bar, poured another glass, and set it beside my laptop. It's ending exactly the way you planned it. The only difference is, this time, I'm the one who planned it. Melanie looked like she might collapse. She slumped into a chair, hand covering her mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. I returned to my chair, sipped quietly, and set the glass beside the open laptop. On the screen behind me, the final slide of the presentation remained, a list of every violation from Matthew's surgeries, and an image of Melanie sneaking printed files from the hospital terminal. I reopened my phone. One touch activated the full system I had pre-programmed. Within 3 seconds, both Matthew's and Melanie's phones buzzed violently. Messages, emails, banking alerts, a flood of notifications lit up their screens. The glow highlighted Matthew's pale face. Primary account frozen due to a federal investigation. Credit card deactivated by issuing bank. Request for full transaction history over the past 24 months. Melanie lunged for her phone, swiping frantically through the alerts, but the more she read, the paler she became. No! This can't be happening, she stammered. I didn't sign anything. How do you even have the right? I looked up, my expression calm. You used your hospital email to send intimate photos, Melanie. What system wouldn't flag that? I tapped the keyboard again. The next slide appeared, a copy of Melanie's internal hospital email, complete with attachments. Sent to Matthew with the subject line, a little motivation for your afternoon surgery. Matthew turned to her, eyes bulging. You used your hospital email? Are you out of your mind? Melanie gasped. She clearly had no idea that action had left a digital trail she couldn't erase. I've sent the full copies to the hospital's IT security department. By Monday morning, they'll open a formal review. But something tells me you won't still be on staff by then. Matthew tried to pull himself together. He stood, taking a few steps forward, his voice suddenly softened and desperate. Kennedy, please, let me explain. We used to be a team, a partnership. This can be fixed. I was wrong, I admit it, but... I cut him off, my voice firm and quiet. You didn't just wrong me. You deceived patients, manipulated records, took illegal money, and risked human lives to boost your performance stats. This isn't about us anymore. This is a crime. His jaw clenched, but I wasn't done yet. I picked up the remote and pressed the final button. A video from a hidden camera in Matthew's hospital office appeared on the screen. The footage clearly showed him accepting a thick envelope from a man in a suit, wearing a name badge from Harmony RX. A thank you gift for last month's prescription package, the man said in the video. Matthew didn't react. He just smiled, nodded, and slid the envelope into his drawer. The dining room went silent. Matthew retreated toward the window, leaning against the wall like a man completely unmoored. Melanie had stopped shouting. She sat frozen, as if staying still might make the truth disappear. I sat across from them. I didn't send all of this at once. I split the files, set up auto deliveries to different agencies in case someone tried to delete the evidence. Everything is encrypted in the cloud. Every step I've taken has been backed up and legally secured. I pulled out a folder and laid out the documents, one by one. List of patients suspected of undergoing unnecessary surgeries. Proof of payment from Harmony RX. Violations of medical ethics. Altered patient files, accessed and edited by Melanie. I looked at them both. You have 2 options. 1, cooperate, sign the papers I've prepared, resign and disappear quietly. 2, we go to court together, face the medical board, the press, and if needed, federal investigators. Matthew collapsed into his chair, hands trembling. How long have you been preparing all this? He asked, his voice almost a confession. I smiled. Since the moment I saw that first message. And no, I haven't lost sleep the way you imagined. The doorbell rang at 8:17 p.m., echoing through the dining room that had just witnessed the total collapse of two people I once called husband and young colleague. I'd been waiting for that bell for nearly 3 months. I stood, glanced at them both, still fumbling with their phones. Too late to delete or hide anything. I opened the door. 2 men in plain clothes stood before me, but one glance at the polished badges on their belts told me they weren't here for small talk. Detective Lawrence and Agent Mitchell, New York State Medical and Insurance Fraud Division, the taller one said crisply. We're here for the coffee and the evidence. I stepped aside to let them in. Both carried thick briefcases, tablets, and the kind of quiet authority that didn't need a badge to prove it. I gestured toward the dining table. They're waiting for you. Matthew jumped to his feet. This is a private home. You don't have a warrant. Detective Lawrence calmly pulled out a packet of papers, opened the top page, and held it out. Signed this morning. Search and seizure authorization, surveillance access, and subpoenas for individuals involved in medical ethics violations and insurance fraud. Melanie took a step back, face pale as paper. I didn't know anything. I was just on the sidelines. Agent Mitchell looked at her, expressionless. You printed compromised medical files from the hospital terminal 3 times. You weren't on the sidelines. You were in the center of the storm. Matthew turned to me, eyes full of despair. Kennedy, just a moment, can we speak alone? I looked at him, no longer angry, only resolute. You once told me I didn't understand what you did in surgery all day, I said, walking toward him. You said you're in marketing. What do you know about long-term strategy? The thing is, I learned to play chess faster than you expected, and I've been 20 moves ahead. As the words left my mouth, Detective Lawrence stepped forward. Matthew Wells, you are under arrest for insurance fraud, accepting bribes from medical corporations, and violations of professional medical ethics. He didn't resist, but as they cuffed him at the same table where we'd shared thousands of meals, I watched his once proud shoulders slump, like someone finally shedding a mask they couldn't hold up anymore. Melanie was asked to stand. A female officer was already waiting at the door to escort her to a separate vehicle for questioning. On the front step, I watched them disappear beneath the soft haze of streetlight. 2 shadows exiting the game they once thought they mastered. The very people who once believed they were manipulating a secret game now bowed their heads, leaving the chessboard I had built, piece by piece, without them noticing. Back inside, the wine glass I hadn't finished still sat on the table. I returned to my seat, tapped my finger against the rim, and listened to the sound reverberate through a dining room that was finally still. 3 months after that night, the final verdict was handed down in a Manhattan federal courtroom. Matthew Wells, once celebrated as one of the most talented neurosurgeons in the Northeast, was sentenced to 15 years in prison for insurance fraud, taking bribes from pharmaceutical companies, and performing unnecessary surgeries that harmed patients. I wasn't present in the courtroom that day. Everything I needed to do, I had already done. Melanie Carter, the woman who once walked into my house in a red dress meant for Matthew, ultimately chose to cooperate with investigators to receive a lighter sentence, after her long list of ethical violations was uncovered. But her medical license was permanently revoked. In the medical world, that's a sentence in itself. She left New York a week after her suspension. From what I've heard, Melanie now lives with her sister in Maine, far from hospitals, ID badges, and the rosy illusions of a future she once thought she could steal. Me. I started with the smallest things. I cleared the entire apartment, every corner that bore traces of Matthew, the tailored suit jackets, the engraved watches, the paintings we once chose together. I didn't destroy anything. I returned them to where they belonged. The past. I sold Matthew's entire collection of fine wine, the one he used to boast about to his medical friends as a symbol of success paired with expensive taste. I donated all the proceeds to a nonprofit medical fund that supports patients harmed by unethical healthcare practices. No name needed, but the press found out. Within 2 weeks, I received letters from several major outlets, the New York Medical Review, the Atlantic Health, even the Guardian in the UK. They all wanted to interview me under one title: the woman who exposed the largest medical manipulation ring of the decade. I didn't deny my role, but I didn't claim the spotlight as some hero either. I said only one thing: I didn't start this to seek revenge. I started it so no one else would be treated like a pawn on the chessboard of people who think they're untouchable. I returned to work at the media corporation, but in a new role, strategic and ethical communications advisor. The offer came directly from the CEO after she read the Washington Post article about me. Kennedy, after everything, I believe no one understands the real value of trust better than you, she wrote in her email. I didn't just accept, I began rewriting the entire internal evaluation system. I still live in the same apartment, the one that once held peaceful mornings and nearly shattered nights. But now, I've changed the curtains, planted a row of lavender along the balcony, and hung a new oil painting in the living room. A single winding road through rocky hills and pine trees. No destination, no signs. A painting that doesn't need explaining. One Sunday morning I brewed coffee, opened the window and stood there for a long time. The city was still noisy, still moving like always, but inside me, no one else was living on borrowed space anymore. 3 months ago I was a betrayed wife, a woman standing at the edge of collapse listening to laughter behind her back. Now, I am the woman who turned pain into power, truth into weaponry, and the silence that once swallowed me whole into a voice that can no longer be ignored. I don't need revenge anymore. I've reclaimed everything. Kennedy's story is a reminder that betrayal doesn't always come wrapped in romance. It often hides in power, prestige, and greed. But in the moment of deepest collapse, a woman with strength can rise, using intellect, resilience, and dignity to reclaim justice. In real life, that message still rings true. Never underestimate a woman in silence. Sometimes, silence is where she's building a strategy to change everything. What do you think about Kennedy's choices and her journey? Share your thoughts below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful stories about life, family, and the lessons that shape us.